One of my biggest complaints with the L mount has got to be the lenses and the adapters. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind the scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. When we think about L mount, a lot of times we're talking about cameras, something like the newly announced Lumix S1 Mark II. That's an L mount camera. There's also the S1R Mark II, or there's cameras like the S9, that's an L mount. You got the S5 Mark II, plenty of L mount cameras. Even Blackmagic makes L mount cameras now. There's L mount cameras, but where's the glass? And more specifically, where are the adapters? I come from a world where I really got into hybrid production, content creation, filmmaking, photography, videography, all of it I got into through Micro Four Thirds, all the way back to the GH1, all the way through still shooting on the GH7. Micro Four Thirds is an awesome platform for cameras and for lenses, and a big reason for that is all the adapters available for Micro Four Thirds. If you flash all the way back to the GH1, one of the main benefits was you could pretty much put any vintage lens on a Micro Four Thirds camera. That wasn't true at the time for EF or the Nikon F mount. They just were built for cameras with a mirror box inside. Micro Four Thirds mirrorless got rid of that restriction. You could adapt anything you wanted to the camera, which was awesome. So there was good native glass. Early on, Micro Four Thirds was kind of, the lenses themselves were a little bit more plasticky, a little bit more cheap consumer grade. Over time, we got some really impressive Micro Four Thirds lenses. So you could find stuff that was cheap, mid-range, really expensive, something like the Leica 10-25. That's probably my favorite lens of all time for Micro Four Thirds. And that lens is expensive, but worth it. So Micro Four Thirds got all these lenses, covered the spectrum. So no matter where you were in your career, beginner, intermediate, or professional, there's something for you Micro Four Thirds lens-wise. And even if there weren't enough native lenses, you could always adapt. Things like the Metabones Speed Booster, very, very popular because now we took Micro Four Thirds and we expanded it to Super 35 APS-C, that same field of view, and you could adapt those lenses and get a faster aperture out of it in the process, a little bit more light, like an extra stop of light by using a speed booster. There's even the Speed Booster XL if it was compatible with your camera. Lots of cool options there. Really cool options for adapting almost anything and everything. So let's go back to L mount and what the problem is. There are good options for L mount when it comes to the lenses, and I would love to see more, specifically more unique options. Panasonic recently announced the 24-60 f2.8, and you might be wondering how that's unique or different or special. Well, it is, considering if you compare it to a traditional 24-70, the 24-60 is lighter, it's smaller, and it's cheaper. So that creates this great spot in the market where we get this unique option, something that really doesn't compete with all the other 24-70s that are out there. God knows there's been plenty of them made up until this point, or even your classics, your 16-35, your 70-200. But now we're entering this age where we're getting a lot of new, cutting edge, interesting, different type of lenses. And I want to see more of that. Something, I've talked about it before many times, but something I would love to see is a full frame 20-50, a 2.8, maybe an f2, something in there would be awesome, especially because that's my favorite focal range, going back to Micro Four Thirds, 10-25. Full frame 20-50 would be awesome. I'd love to see Leica or someone out there do it. Please, please give us a lens like that. More lens options for L mount, but also adapters. We've got years and years and years of old glass, vintage now, I suppose, but it's really not all that old. Canon EF used to be the most popular lens mount just a few years ago. Everything switched to mirrorless. Now we've got the RF mount. Nikon's got the Z mount. Sony has the E mount, which they've been running for quite a while. And so you'll see cool adapters like this one from Metabones. That's a Canon EF to Sony E mount, and it's an electronic ND smart adapter. How cool is that? Where is that for L mount? I want this exact adapter, but instead of going to E mount, I want it to go to L mount. Well, here we run into the situation. Chicken or egg? Do you make all the cameras, get those into people's hands, and then go make all the lenses to make them happy? Or do you make all the lenses, but no one has camera bodies, and so you have no one to sell your lenses to? Even these adapters, right? They sit somewhere in between the camera body and the lens itself. So you really have to kind of play your cards right if you're a company trying to make products that are popular and they're going to sell. But I certainly would be first in line to buy a Metabones Canon EF to L mount adapter with END. I think that's incredibly cool. I actually missed this when it came out, and I haven't seen many people talking about it. I can't speak to the performance. I don't know how well it works, if the autofocus or any of that works well. I would imagine it kind of does. I've tested some of the other Metabones products, and they do have a track record for decent firmware support, adding functionality to older adapters, even when the newer cameras come out. So I do like to see that from Metabones, but I'd love to see this type of adapter for L mount, and I'd love to see even more. More options, the better, is what I say. But I'm kind of an audience of one. I'm one person out there. I'm not going to buy all this stuff and keep all these companies afloat. It really does take, a lot of people to have the demand, and maybe the demand just isn't there. So I'd ask you, what are you looking for? Because I know one of the big criticisms for the L mount is just that there's not enough lenses, but I also think there's not enough adapters. Even in addition to an electronic ND mount, I'd love to see just a drop-in adapter for NDs in terms of the L mount. EF to L mount, yeah, have it be a smart adapter, aperture and focus work, but let's drop in some ND filters. That doesn't even exist. For the amount of times you look around, there's PL to L mount, but there's no EF to L mount. I wonder why that is. Maybe just not enough demand, not enough camera bodies, not enough people out there enthusiastic about adapting old Canon EF lenses to L mount, but I'm certainly one of them. I think it's incredibly cool, and there are a handful of adapters. You can adapt EF to L mount with smart adapters. Viltrox makes one, Photodiox makes one. There's even some with variable NDs built in, so that's a good starting point. But electronic ND, I think, is what I'm most excited about, or some kind of drop-in filter system. One of the biggest problems to close this out is just that L mount, for as popular as it is gaining traction, and as popular as Micro Four Thirds was. You look at Lumix, Panasonic, camera manufacturer that has embraced both of those mounts, and yet L mount and Micro Four Thirds aren't compatible in any way. I can't take Micro Four Third lenses and use them on a full frame L mount. That sort of makes sense. The lenses just don't have the image circle. They're not going to cover the sensor. So I kind of get that. But L mount lenses don't work on Micro Four Third cameras. The flange distance, there's just not room. It doesn't work. You can't adapt it. They're incompatible. And I think that's, unfortunately, in hindsight, a huge oversight, actually, that Panasonic, working with Leica, embraced the L mount, went full frame, started putting out lenses, and didn't really consider compatibility with their existing line of camera bodies, users, and lenses. They went from Micro Four Thirds to L mount, and they still are doing both, so I'll give them that, but there's no compatibility between the two. Compare that to EF and RF, or Nikon F and Z, or shoot, even Sony and their E mount. They've just been doing that forever. They did have the alpha mount before, so there is that to consider, but that's so long and gone. I don't think many people think about it, really. Just unfortunate. Nothing to be said now or to be done now. It is what it is. L mount is here. It's to stay. Panasonic, Leica, DJI, Blackmagic, Sigma, they've all embraced it. It is seemingly the new standard for that section of the industry doing full frame using the L mount. But yeah, would have been nice in hindsight to maybe have a little bit more compatibility with those older Micro Four Third cameras. Even the newer ones, like a GH7, for example, which I own and I shoot with often. I can't put any of my L mount glass on my GH7. To say it another way, I can't put any of my Panasonic L mount lenses on my Panasonic Micro Four Thirds camera. And I think maybe that's the simplest way to paint the picture of the problem that I'm trying to illustrate, is that Panasonic themselves make two completely separate lines, even though the camera bodies share a lot of the same software, structure, architecture, vlog, all of it is very, very similar, almost identical between Micro Four Thirds and full frame. And yet the mount itself is so inherently incompatible that if you buy L mount lenses, you can't use them on Micro Four Thirds and vice versa. There's good physical reasons for that, but I wish we lived in a world where that wasn't the case. But like I said, there's nothing we can do now. It is what it is. L mount is what it is. Micro Four Thirds is what it is. But it would have been nice maybe 10 years ago or so, or whenever these conversations were happening behind closed doors, had they thought, maybe considered, let's introduce the L mount, but let's make sure that these same lenses, they can be, they're maybe be optimized, right? They're full frame lenses. They'll be optimized for L mount bodies, but they can still be used on Micro Four Thirds. Wouldn't that have been cool? Wouldn't that have been nice? Some kind of adapter, some kind of system to work between the two to bridge that gap and get L mount further ahead than it has been. Oh well, hindsight is 20/20. It is what it is. We only have where we are now to look forward, and I would love to see more lenses, more adapters, more unique options that give us more creative control over what we're shooting and how we're shooting it. Because that's how I look at lenses. What does it allow me to do? If I'm getting a zoom lens that covers a certain range, how can I use that range to its fullest? And what aperture is pairing with it? How is that going to give me an advantage or disadvantage depending on the situation? Maybe I do want a super small, lightweight lens for certain situations, but other times you're willing to have something bigger, heavier, bulkier, and that's fine too. And they both have strengths and weaknesses. There's always trade-offs. There's always compromises. Nothing is like perfect, exactly what you want for every scenario. But given the lens, if it is unique enough, it always has room to stand out in the market, I think. But I'm sick of seeing the same old, same old. I don't need more 24 to 70s. I don't need more 70 to 200s. We have those. We had them. If we can adapt them with cool adapters with built-in functionality like electronic ND, great. But for the new stuff, let's see some more unique things out there. Sigma is doing a decent job. Things like the 28 to 45 are unique, but I think there's this weird oversight. There's no one really making the wide to medium range focal length zoom. It's always this like end of like 28 to 45. I don't know. It's not my favorite. 20 to 50, that's where it's at. I'm going to keep saying it until it exists. Leica is sitting over there. It's the L mount because of Leica. Leica, L mount. I want to see more from Leica as well. Lenses and adapters, I think that's what's missing right now. And not just more for the sake of more, but also unique lenses that stand out in the market and really can't be found anywhere else. Because I tell you what, at the end of the day, if you want to sell more camera bodies, you want to sell more cameras, you got to give them a good reason with the glass. The lenses are where it's at. If there's something unique for L mount that you can't find anywhere else, you will definitely sell more L mount camera bodies based on the lens alone. And that kind of goes both ways. Obviously, the cameras have unique features and people are willing to buy a good camera for the features. But if there aren't good lenses or unique lenses or good adapters, maybe people will skip out on the camera. You have to have both cameras, lenses, and those adapters in between. Build it out. That will actually end up, as a whole, I think you'll actually end up selling more than any one thing, right? Why would we make more lenses? Why would we make more camera bodies? They all kind of help each other in this reinforcing cycle. The more cameras you sell, the more lenses you sell, the more cameras you sell, and so on and so on. The more adapters you make, the more lenses you sell, and back to the beginning and selling more cameras. It's a nice little cycle that the more options are out there, the more they'll actually sell and the more popular it'll be. But I don't know. Will we see that? Let me know what you think.